Welcome, everybody, to GameThinkTalk's biggest gaming news of 2017. 2017. Sounds so weird when you say it like that. 2017. We're going to be talking about what I thought were the biggest news stories of the year. So let's get to it. There we go. Feel free to chime in with your opinions on the news pieces and also any questions or things you want to see addressed or talked about on the show. All right, so first off, the Nintendo Switch debuted this year. One of the strongest years on record for quite a while for Nintendo. It became the fastest selling console of all time in North America. It's a hybrid console. We all know that. People were wondering, how is this going to do? What was Nintendo going to do with it? Nintendo has always had great success with handhelds. The Game Boy, even though it was... God, the technology in the Game Boy was just good enough to be functional. It couldn't quite play the games the same way that they could play them on the NES. I'm talking, the Mario Land on the Game Boy was a far cry from Mario 1, but it was still good enough. You could play Tetris on it. It became probably the best-selling game for that console. And they made games that worked for that console. Kirby, light platformers of that kind of style. Maybe that's why I don't really like Kirby now, is that it always feels like it's drawing from that. And then with the DS, another huge success for Nintendo. One of their best-selling consoles of all time. The 3DS, even though that one seems like that's the one I would want to get the most because of the 3D. I really enjoy the 3D. That one didn't do as well. They suffered with launch. They had some problems with it. But Nintendo had, ever since the Wii and the Wii U, had this less powerful console. The Wii was only doing things at 480p when the industry had all gone to HD. It was such a shame to see this underpowered, blurry-looking console playing genius games like Galaxy 1 and 2. You had 2 Zeldas on there. You had a new Super Mario Bros. Wii. The Last Story, that RPG by Sakaguchi, Mr. Final Fantasy, all played in standard definition while the rest of the world had embraced HD already. And with the Wii U as well, it was a little bit more powerful. And you could have a tablet that you could walk 10 feet away from your console and still play in the bathroom or in bed maybe, or play if someone else is using the TV. But none of those benefits of the Wii or the Wii U really made up for the lack of power. But with the Switch, we finally have a reason why it's okay for it to be less powerful. And while the rest of the world is trying to go for 4K, HDR, Nintendo is fine with 720p. Maybe upscaled a little bit, but it's still in HD and it looks fine on the screen. And that might be their way to compete, and they can still play games like Doom is on there, Rocket League, Skyrim, Dark Souls is going to come to it. These are really important games to have on a Nintendo platform, where the weakness of Nintendo for a long time, ever since the N64, has been a lack of third-party support. The Wii had a lot of third-party support because so many people owned Wiis that there was a big opportunity for game publishers to make money there, but you weren't seeing a lot of great games on there, not a lot of great quality games, and the multi-platform stuff that was coming to the Wii was nothing special, and it was usually a butchered version of something you could play. You didn't want to play Call of Duty on the Wii unless you didn't have any other option. Even though I thought that they could have used the Wii Mote as basically a mouse, is what they really should have done, and had basically keyboard and mouse style controls. But that never really caught on. But with the Switch, you've got, like I said, Doom, big AAA games that are modern, that look great and run great on other platforms, and look and run well enough on the Switch. Rocket League, I was playing that online. It's the perfect Switch for the port. They sacrifice resolution. They have dynamic resolution scaling. So what they'll do is they'll drop it down when they need to. Kind of like if you're watching a YouTube video or a Twitch video and it buffers down, all of a sudden everybody looks really blocky. It'll look like that. But that's not a game where you're really looking at the resolutions. It's like a racing game. It's all about the motion. That game runs at a very fluid frame rate, and the performance never suffers, even when the visuals do. So you have these games alongside all the great indie games from Steam that are just the perfect place to play on a handheld. So the Switch did really well there. It brought back a lot of the mainstream fans as well. I know a lot of people that haven't bought a console in years, and they bought this. They unfortunately also bought Mario Rabbids, whatever that is, Invasion, which is not, I'm not saying that that's a bad game, but for these people, my friends that bought it, They bought it thinking it was a new Mario game and were very, very confused when they were playing a version of XCOM when they didn't even know what XCOM was. They weren't up on the classic DOS games of yesteryear and their remakes and reboots. So Nintendo had a great debut, a great year. Because the Wii U was very underserved, not many people owned a Wii U. You have all these great games that aren't that old, still in the HD era, that Nintendo can now have in their back pocket to pad out all the time. So if they have a month where they don't have a lot of new games coming out, like for example, they announced on this Nintendo Mini Direct that Tropical Freeze is coming. Donkey Kong is a popular genre with a lot of people. A lot of people have great memories of playing that on the Super Nintendo. And Tropical Freeze is a great version of Donkey Kong that not a lot of people played on the Wii U, and that's something they can bring forward. They've already brought forward Mario Kart. Splatoon 2 is basically Splatoon from the Wii U, but with a few other things added on to it. And they can continue to do that for probably a little while. There's a few other games they could bring forward if they like. And those multiplayer games work really well. We've heard that Mario Tennis is going to be coming out as well. That's going to work great on that screen. It's a game that you can play on a split Joy-Con because you probably only need a few buttons at the most. I'm assuming light hit, power hit, you call it a day. And also multiplayer on the Switch screen. I think if you can find these games that don't split the screen, like Mario Kart on a Switch tablet is pushing it a little bit unless both people are really up close and paying attention. It kind of reminds me of playing Mario 64 on a very, very small CRT screen and sitting, 2 feet away from the screen. Star Fox was the worst to see what was going on, but we did it at the time and it worked. But now that we're so used to playing on 50-inch flat screen, beautiful HD TVs, to split a tiny tablet can be a problem. But I think Mario Tennis will get around that because you're putting everything on the screen. It's a lot like Smash Brothers in that way. You don't have to give up any real estate to play multiplayer. So the Switch had a great year. I think it's going to continue to have more success. And they're bringing back a lot of the people that might have dropped off because they didn't want to spend that much on a console to only play Nintendo games. So now if you're interested in these indies, these shooters, Dark Souls, they're ticking a lot of boxes. Let's see some more strategy games on there, okay? So we also saw the best Mario and Zelda in years. I've spoken a lot about Zelda. I thought I was done with Zelda, and it brought me back in a way I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. And also Mario. One of the best Marios in years, moving forward. Some bad news that came out this year. PewDiePie, JonTron, we've seen YouTubers get in trouble for being racially insensitive. And PewDiePie, the biggest YouTuber in the world for a long time now, had said the N-word in an exclamation during a match, calling an opponent that. And when the outrage came back, he, instead of apologizing, more or less just blamed the media for making it a bigger deal than it was, and then continued to say it. So I don't think he really gets it. He's lived in a bubble for a long time. I mean, could you imagine if you're a guy in a room making videos that everyone in the world is, well, everyone in the YouTube world is watching? You're a superstar, so he's going to have to tread carefully with that. It seems like he's avoided controversy for quite a while. But JonTron as well got booted out of a ukulele for going on a rant about, I think he was talking about Muslims or immigration to North America. Whatever views you have, I don't think that if you've gotten an audience of millions of people that come to watch you for gaming content and all of a sudden you start dropping some serious political agenda, it's up to you if you want to do it, but it's obviously not worked out for them. Probably would be wise to start another channel and do that if they want to continue the success they've had with gaming. But if that's what they really feel they have to do, then who's going to stop them? Well, lots of people are. 2017 was a year of a lot of lows, a lot of deaths, a lot of political problems, and it's also been a year in an era where people are pushing back. Women's rights, trans rights. A lot of people are pushing for an even playing field in the world and a sensitivity to that, and that's a great thing. And these guys are on the other side of that. PUBG, back to some good news. A game which should have been a silly little mod, ended up taking over the world. Not just, if this game had any kind of success, it would have been a big surprise. For it to knock off the biggest games on Twitch for the first time in years, we didn't see a MOBA as the most played game on Twitch. That is astounding. That's one of the biggest things we've seen in years. And has already inspired a few games to switch over their mode. What was it? Fortnite switched over to this Battlegrounds mode, when that wasn't what their Kickstarters originally backed it for. So you got to think that some people there who wanted to back a different kind of game, and all of a sudden it gets changed. I mean, if I'm putting my money in because I want to see, like a Shadowrun type role-playing game, my favorite game for the Genesis, and all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, it's just a Battleground game now, thanks for your money. That could piss off a lot of people, and I don't think that's, I mean, it's a business decision, but you are giving people you're giving some people different from what you sold them on. So there's that. All right, now, and it's already inspired those copycats, and we're going to see plenty more where that came from. How about nostalgia? That sold pretty well this year. Crash Bandicoot. Sony had everybody convinced that they loved playing Crash Bandicoot games, and they couldn't wait to buy a remade version of them. The remaster was basically a remake remaster. They didn't change anything, but they had to rebuild it from the ground up. And I mean, there's so much hype around this thing. I bought into it, and didn't even finish one of them, I don't think. They're very frustrating games. There's a reason that those games, people don't make them like that anymore. And they tried to help you out a little bit with a few more checkpoints, I do believe, but and I think there was, yeah, that's right. The jumping was actually different from how it was back then, so it did seem harder. It is harder now than it was back then. But we saw Crash do extremely well. We see Sonic Mania doing extremely well. And what else did really well? Yooka-Laylee had a huge Kickstarter success. I mean, if you like listening to YouTubers do 20-minute reviews on why a game is really good or why it's actually bad, and you have any interest in Yooka-Laylee, there's tons and tons of content for you to be checking out there. And we saw Hat in Time, a platformer with very little fanfare, but actually came out to rave reviews. So, I mean, and Mario Odyssey was no slouch when it came to nostalgia as well. It was, I mean, there's 2D Mario gaming in that from Super Mario Brothers 1. Modified a bit, but nostalgia all over that game. Sometimes a little bit too much, I think. But nostalgia is not going away. Nostalgia and hype are these two legal drugs that you sell to gamers and will help sales. EA had a horrible year. They kill Mass Effect. They had plans for a new trilogy. A sequel trilogy to one of the most popular sci-fi trilogies in gaming of all time. Sounds like Star Wars. Hard to do, but they had a great idea. Let's take it to another galaxy. Perfect. Now you can start all over again. You have the possibility of meeting new races, seeing things you've never seen before. And instead, the first planet you land on, although it looks beautiful and wondrous and wild and magical and so different, you run into a race, and within a few seconds, you're killing them. You're killing the first signs of life that you've encountered. There are no repercussions to that, and they end up becoming a generic bad guy, bunch of monsters, and that's it. I mean, EA brutalized this game by not devoting any resources to it. They obviously were more interested in Anthem, an online game. They put a team in charge of Andromeda that had never shipped a full game on their own. They put a lead director on the game that had never shipped a full game on his own. They put the Mass Effect, the people who actually were responsible for Mass Effect ended up on Anthem. And they were taking people and ideas from Andromeda for Anthem. And EA forced them to use the DICE engine, which looks amazing in Battlefield and Battlefront, but is not conducive to making an RPG. And they really put this new studio, they really handicapped them, having them use this engine that just wasn't designed for RPGs. They had to bolt on a lot of things, and it just caused big problems. The scope a very large game got out of hand. They couldn't do it. They couldn't deliver what people wanted and what they wanted to do. So it was a huge failure. The new trilogy is basically canceled now. And that's that. Oh, EA. And they had an even rougher time with Battlefront. Probably one of the biggest stories of the year is Star Wars Battlefront 2. EA is going to put in paid loot boxes, capitalizing on basically like energy games that you get on your mobile in a way where they're trying to. I mean, when you play a mobile game with these energy systems that are free to play, I could fit the whole world in that head. The whole point is that it's fun, and we're going to slow you down in a way that makes you want to pay money. So with paid loot boxes, people had been playtesting it in the beta, and doing the math, they realized for us to unlock Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, the reason you would want to play a Star Wars game, you're selling people the license. The license is these characters, and you're locking them behind dozens of hours of time it takes to unlock them. And it's still a random chance, by the way. Or you're going to convince people to pay for them, to buy these boxes and gamble for them. And that wasn't right. But they tried to get away with it. And one of the best stories of the year is that the public outcry against it was so large. One of the most downvoted Reddit comments, oh, I sounded really Canadian there, downvoted comments in Reddit history, that they convinced EA, one of the biggest game companies in the world, one that obviously has made a lot of decisions that are not popular and is not afraid of unpopular decisions. They're a business after all, you can't fault them for that. Made a huge change to a game days before launch. This has never happened before. And this moment could be momentous for gamers and gaming going forward. Loot boxes and gambling aspects of free-to-play games that we're seeing now in full-priced games are a way to make money that is proven. But the way they make money is by preying on tendencies to gamble and tendencies to be addicted. A very psychological side of gaming that shouldn't be there, and you shouldn't make money off of that. That's not right. That's something, I mean, that is how a lot of things work. Alcohol, caffeine, sugar, any drug basically that is legalized, nicotine. You're capitalizing off of people's addiction. But the thing with games is that they're not sold to adults. They're sold to everybody. And you shouldn't be trying to convince somebody to give into their addiction and pay thousands of dollars because you're giving them a few hats in a game or outfits or anything. So this moving forward is huge because now AAA companies, big publishers, or anyone actually, any company that could have been interested in doing these loot box practices is going to remember what happened to EA and think it might not be worth it for us to try in case we have to take it out, because that's what EA had to do. So that's huge. If EA had gotten away with this, you would have seen probably 5 times as much in 2018 and 2019 as publishers started jamming that into games, and then in games that are already in production, bolting them on, and then all the games that are going to be coming out soon that are going to be designed around it. Not coming out soon, but starting development soon and be designed around that. So a huge negative on the side of EA, but a huge positive for everybody else that fought against it. So bravo to the people that made that happen. Oh, on the Microsoft side of things, they canceled Scalebound. One of the few exclusives that Microsoft had that looked interesting, canceled. Sometimes that's for the best. It's better to not put out a bad game, to just take what you have and maybe try to put it into something else. Sony pulled ahead big time in the last year or so. In the UK, over 50% of all games purchased are for the PS4. 7% are for the Nintendo Switch and the rest for Xbox. 30%. So actually there's some other outlier there as well. Sony did that with exclusives and indie support. Now, Microsoft really lacked a lot of that. Cuphead was a big one. PUBG is another big one. But Microsoft does this thing where because they also own Windows, they don't like to use console exclusivity. So I think that's a big problem on their side, because if you owned a PS4 and a PC, you really have so much more covered than if you owned an Xbox and a PC. So they're not incentivizing people to buy an Xbox if they already have a PC, and lots of people have PCs. And it's getting cheaper to be a PC gamer all the time, and it's one of the, I mean, although it can be more of a startup cost, there's such a huge availability of cheap games on there. But now you're just so much better off having, say, a PlayStation and PC, or PC and Nintendo, or Nintendo and PlayStation. But Microsoft is on a headhunt right now to buy some indie studios. That's come out of news reports. Microsoft is looking for studios to either finance or to purchase, to work with. But at this point, it's a little late. That'll be great in, say, 2 to 3 years from now. But unless you can grab somebody that has a game that's almost about to come out and they're looking for somebody, that could work. But Microsoft has amazing backwards compatibility as well. You can put in 360 games on an Xbox One, and it will run at a higher resolution than it did on the 360. And this is all completely free. All you have to do is buy a 360 game you can probably get for less than $20. That's amazing. That's something that Sony is not going to do. They can't afford to do that, but Microsoft can. Microsoft can put in the money, the time, man hours, the woman hours, the in-between hours to get that done. Visceral closes, another huge negative on the side of EA. Now, closing Visceral is a business decision, and that's fine. But the problem was that the way EA talked about it, when they said, we want to offer more games as a service, more games online. They said that this is what people want, not single-player games. That was the wrong thing to say. There are Star Wars fans, many like myself, who are really looking forward to an Amy Hennig-led game about a smuggler-type Star Wars character. I mean, if you're thinking Han Solo meets Uncharted in the Star Wars universe, that sounds amazing. To hear EA close the studio, cancel the game, not know what they're going to do with Amy Hennig. And for many people that liked Uncharted 2 and 3 a lot more than Uncharted 4, which is the one Amy Hennig didn't have anything to do with, I like them all for their own reasons, they were probably really looking forward to this too. So for EA to come out and say we want to do games as a service, multiplayer games, and not single player, is a way to piss people off that were really excited for this game. You heard other reports from Kotaku. I think Jason Schreier broke it that there may have been a lot of other problems. Maybe Amy Hennig was struggling to lead the team because she had never had to be in that position before. She is a great storyteller, but maybe doesn't know how to communicate with programmers and the technical side of things. And maybe she always had somebody at Naughty Dog that could fill in that side of things. So maybe she needs a technical partner. I guess maybe that was what Neil Druckmann did with her at Naughty Dog. So hopefully she gets to do something else. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure Microsoft would want to snatch her up. Or Sony, if she leaves. So that was another thorn coming out of EA's rose. And that was really about it for the biggest news of the year. Leave some comments on other stuff you thought were bigger news pieces than that, but man, I thought that's what it was for me. 2017 was a great year, great games, precedent-setting things in the news. Nintendo had their biggest year ever. I loved it. I'll see you later. Bye for now.